What's up, guys? Sean Strickland's takedown defense is a big question going into this Dricus Du Plessis fight. There's talk about Strickland having good takedown defense and even himself saying that he might even be better on the ground than he is in the stand-up. But you just never really see it as he doesn't face a lot of wrestlers in the middleweight division. He defended a lot more takedowns at welterweight than he did at middleweight. We're going to touch on both here. First, we're going to start with the more meaningful middleweight takedown defensive skills that Sean Strickland has showed. And then when we get to the welterweight division, we have to understand that it was a long time ago and Strickland was cutting a lot of weight, probably declined his strength a bit to fight in that weight class, but still showed great takedown defense nonetheless. Now, the vast majority of takedowns that Sean Strickland has defended against were double legs and single legs. Push him up against the fence or just in the center of the octagon. Of course, if they push him against the fence, they're going to look to trip him out, pick him up, slam him, and you see a common technique from Sean Strickland whenever this would happen. So firstly, before he gets on the cage, Strickland's stance is very upright. He's standing tall, and his legs are narrow, which invites a double leg takedown. If his legs were more wide and bladed to the side, you're probably going to see more single legs as you don't have to cross as much distance to create contact. With Strickland's tall, narrow stance, you saw a lot of fighters attack him with the double leg takedown. And Strickland specifically has much better hand position and hand control than he does sprawling or anything like that. He's much better at using his hands to defend your takedown than he is his own hips or legs. This can clearly explain as to why his tall stature doesn't allow him to sprawl or doesn't allow him to be as explosive with his hips as some other fighters. His hand speed with his punches are pretty fast, and that translates to him fighting off takedowns using his hands as well. Underhooks, whizzers, elbow frames, bicep control. He does a lot of things there while trying to drive his hips away as far as possible to throw off any kind of takedown. He's very, very quick with getting his hands to the position he needs to defend a takedown. That's the majority of the way he likes to get away from this. And even on the cage, it's a lot of hand fighting, a lot of prying open the opponent's grip. But there was a time against Magomedov, which was the last takedown he had to deal with. Right? He hasn't dealt with a takedown ever since he fought Magomedov. He did get taken down, and he did get his back taken momentarily. But how did he get out of the back take? Hand fought his way out of there. Held onto Abus's wrist with both hands, opened up the grip and an escape for him to rotate his way out. Now let's look at the specific takedowns and how he defended some of these. So we're going to start with the Abus Magomedov fight. So the whole thing around that fight was Abus being extremely aggressive in the first round. It was his UFC debut, and he was coming out there to knock Strickland out. Well, with this kind of aggression, Strickland allowed his opponent to play that game, and he kind of followed suit, not trying to fight fire with this guy until his opponent gasses out, and that was his game plan going into it. He waited until Abus gassed himself out. But what came with this aggression was a double leg from Abus Magomedov in the first round, the lone takedown that he shot in the fight. So Abus, as we know, switches stances constantly to open up some of his body kicks and head kicks. In this case, Sean Strickland is a primarily orthodox fighter. You open that stance up by switching into southpaw, and this is great for a kicker in general. Well, while he's in southpaw, it also allows you to lead hand trap or play with the opponent's lead hand, probing your lead forward, create some distraction up top while also limiting what your opponent could do with his lead hand. It's a great measuring stick as well, but the thing about Strickland is he doesn't keep his lead hand out there that often. His arms are always close to his head and to his chest, which is going to make Abus's lead hand have to extend further in order to get in front of Strickland's hand because Strickland's hand's on his chest. So the distance is actually very close, which always will put Abus or any opponent of Strickland's into a bit of a danger zone of getting punched in the face. For an example, Strickland could extend forward with the right straight from this position and connect because of how close Abus has to get in order to extend his lead hand in front of Strickland's lead. It's not as effective on Sean Strickland, mainly when it comes to limiting his own boxing. This is not going to be as effective as it would be against someone who likes to probe their lead hand out there, but instead of using this to open up strikes, he uses this to go under for a double leg as Strickland takes a step forward. So look at Strickland's hand position. It starts a little bit lower than the chest, his right hand is under his chin, and as soon as the level change comes, Strickland extends his lead hand forward and right hand up, getting into a rather defensive position, and this is how quick he recognizes the double leg. He is still able to get his lead arm in between him and Abus, acting as a barrier in between them, could even get him in a bit of a crossface just to throw off the pressure and the angle. And because of this resistance, Abus was not able to have a good, powerful drive. So instead, he pushes Strickland to the fence, and that's where Strickland goes with the left underhook and the right overhook. You're going to see many times that left underhook is going to be a key tool for Strickland for many of these takedowns, specifically the left underhook. And from there, Abus has a strong body lock. He's using a lot of his strength here. You could definitely tell tell with the way that he pulled Strickland off the fence in order to fit his own leg around Strickland's left to trip him out backwards and toward a right angle. Using that left underhook of his with that body lock, he's going to pull Strickland to his own right, tripping him over the leg. And this is where you see Strickland give up his back. So immediately when he hits the ground, he does not try to get in the full guard. He does not try to fight the position. Abels does a good job of rotating to the back at the same time that Strickland posts and leans to his own right side in order to find a way to stand up. And Abels is attacking the rear naked choke. He's constantly looking for these finishing opportunities, which ultimately did gas him out in the fight. But look immediately what Strickland does here. He grabs onto Abels' left arm. He's very, very quick with the hand fighting. And as he pulls that forward and keeping his left knee high up into his own arm, he's taking away a potential hook there and looks to stand up at the same time. That's where Abels puts his left arm through and hooking under Strickland's left hamstring to hold himself in position from getting completely off balance here. And because of that, he was able to regain balance enough for him to get that left hook in. So it actually was a good adjustment from Abels right there, at the same time that Strickland is trying to fight off the other hand here, constantly looking to hand fight. He has his left hand controlling Abels' right. And that's where he gets 2-on-1. He's thinking multiple steps ahead from just defending the choke. He believes if he could defend the choke, he could find his way out of this position. And he never looks distraught at all. He always looks fairly comfortable, or at least calm, in this quote-unquote bad position. And because he has two hands on one, his strength on that grip is going to be a bit too strong for Abels. And notice right here, when Abels tries to get in the other hook, look how Strickland is looking at the screen and also feeling out the position himself. He flares out his right elbow under Abels' right leg from getting the hook in. But very importantly, he's bending his arm upward, almost like he's going to guard his own head in a textbook boxing kind of way. That's the way his arm is formed. If he made his arm straight, Abels would have trapped that arm as well with getting that hook in, which would have been the worst position for Sean Strickland. But because he bent his arm and only used his elbow, he was able to stop that hook from getting in and at the same time fight that right hand with a 2-on-1 grip. This is going to create enough of an opening for him to pull on that arm and rotate his way around to get back to his feet. And that's where Abels follows his way up, holding onto the body lock, and Strickland fights off the grip. Very risky, but good adjustment from Sean Strickland right there. Then we look at his fight with Kristof Jotko. So Jotko is in a constant back-propelling fight, constantly moving away on the back foot the entire fight. And when he got hurt, Strickland tried to pounce on him with a right straight, which Jotko slips on the outside of the punch and tries to counter that aggression with a double leg takedown. But look how quick Strickland is to act, even after overextending with his right hand. He lowers levels to meet Jotko and elbow frames off his head, throwing off the distance for Jotko to get that double leg. And we do know that if you're trying to grip and your arms are further out away from your body, it's going to be weaker. So Strickland was easily able to get him off. Then we look at the Nassourdine Imavov fight. So Imavov was giving Strickland the same feint in order to line up his own punch, and then later use that to trick him to set up for a takedown. So it's a different level of targeting. The first one is up to the head with a punch. The second one is to the hips with the takedown, hoping for Strickland to give the same kind of reaction of keeping his hands up high. So Imavov feints with a jab to get Strickland's right hand to extend forward for the parry, which is going to open up the side for his half-beat left hook. So every punch, every motion has a beat to it, right? To make it a half-beat attack. One thing you can do is you can fake nearly halfway that you're throwing a strike and then detour that into another. So a fake jab, coming out there halfway with it and then turning it into the left hook just to create that first feint in order to open up the side is a good half-beat attack that a lot of fighters actually go to. It's becoming much more of a norm in MMA. And ultimately with that, he's trying to land the right overhand, and notice how Strickland keeps both of his hands up. Specifically, that left arm is very high up to block the right overhand. Now, not the exact same kind of feint, but Imavov does throw up another left hook feint up top, but he didn't have enough distance as Strickland was pressuring forward now to use the exact same feint he did last time. So by leaning back, he throws what would be an intercepting left hook. Strickland did think that it was going to be a jab. That's why he extended forward with his right arm to parry what he thought was going to be a jab. And he leans his own head away. This is a very good reaction you want to see when you're trying to set up your takedown on your opponent. So he goes under for the double leg and everything looks pretty good, but you can see Strickland's arms are lowering. And he was still fast enough, even with the gained weight. He was much heavier in this fight because he did take it up on short notice. And it was at the light heavyweight division. He was still fast enough to bring that left hand, post it on Imavov's head, and push away while bringing his legs away from the takedown. And the fact that he pushed his head to the left is going to throw off a potential double leg, making that left arm of Imavov's a lot weaker. shoving his face to the mat. Great takedown defense, even though it looked like a pretty good setup that was going to work for Imavov. Then we go to the Jack Hermansson fight, and Jack Hermansson is a big reason as to why Sean Strickland's takedown defensive rate is very, very high. Strickland defended so many takedowns against this guy, and constantly throughout the fight, Jack Hermansson was giving him the same kind of look for many of his attacks. He was given a low-level feint, sometimes squat feinting, but mostly having a dip or a lean with it as he was extending his jabs. And as Hermansson was bouncing side to side and back and forth, Strickland tried to time the footwork here. He tried to intercept the front bounce, so as Hermansson bounces back, Strickland anticipated a forward bounce, so he tried to intercept this with the jab. But Hermansson came to a stop and deflected the jab to the side past his left guard, which is going to cause a great overextension. And off of that overextension, he looked to counter under it with the double leg takedown. And Strickland was still able to bring that left arm down and under in between them two for that left underhook and an overhook with his right arm, very similar to what you saw last time against Abus Magomedov. Eventually, as Hermansson tried to put up as much pressure on Strickland as possible up against the fence and maybe potentially turn the takedown into another angle, Strickland was able to get the right underhook as well, even while under that kind of pressure. These double underhooks are really going to make it hard for Hermansson to complete that takedown and naturally forces Hermansson to rise up, and he turns that double leg into a single leg instead. So what Strickland does instead is he pushes down Hermansson's head with his left hand and keeping separation between them two by pushing away on his right arm, holding a bit of bicep control with his right hand. He eventually does get that right hand position taken away and is now relying on just pushing Hermansson's head down, which is going to take away a lot of takedown opportunities. It takes off a bit of pressure that he can go to. It's hard to have a good drive like this, and you can't really rise your head upward, making it difficult to lift the leg up as well. But Hermansson turns that single leg back into the double leg, which is a very good adjustment that he made. Locking his hands around the legs is going to make this head post a lot more insignificant. If he kept this single leg, it would have been much harder for him to complete this takedown, but because he turned it into the double leg, he can use a bit more strength in this process. So he is able to lift Strickland up and try to slam him to the mat, and Strickland was able to rotate posts on the ground, which he has done a few times throughout his career, and as quickly as possible to eliminate the option of his opponent to get his back. He quickly gets to his feet and postures up. As you can see, when he got up to his feet, he elevated Hermansson off his own feet, which could have been an opening for him to get the hooks, but he was ultimately holding on to the body lock, and that's where Strickland put his forehead to the fence and just focused on fighting off the hands, succeeds and separates off the underhook. Here's another takedown from Jack Hermansson, where after Strickland throws the jab, Hermansson thought it was going to be a similar kind of thing from the last time, but there wasn't an overextension this time. There wasn't that much power thrown in the jab, ultimately causing Hermansson to shoot from a pretty far distance with not a very good setup, and Strickland saw it a mile away, but doesn't use the underhook this time. He brings his left hand under Hermansson's chin, lifts it up to take away any kind of meaningful drive. It can naturally force his opponent to settle themselves in the clinch as their head is elevated upward. Keeping the arm in between them two, he simply pushes Hermansson off as Hermansson was throwing the knee. Similar kind of thing again. Hermansson tried to intercept him with the double leg, comes from too far of a distance, didn't get Strickland to overextend, and instead of the left underhook, Strickland gets in the right underhook because Hermansson attacked the other side. So with the takedown, he didn't go through the path of the lead leg. He goes around for the rear leg first, which is a bit different. Maybe because he wanted to angle Strickland for the fence, because Strickland was at a bit of a different angle if he got pushed straight backwards, but nonetheless, Strickland was easily able to push him off. Another similar concept. So Jack Hermansson was leaning a bit to the right and back away from Strickland, so you could see there's more weight on Hermansson's back leg. So any punch thrown from Strickland is going to cause him to get closer to Hermansson. You could see here a couple times that Hermansson's range was not really there, right? He didn't have great distance management with the takedown, so he's trying to get Sean Strickland to come in closer to him instead. So by throwing the jab, Strickland has to get closer due to the fact that Hermansson's leaning his head away from him. And off of the jab, Hermansson tries to go for the double leg and it literally made no difference. Strickland was still able to defend it very, very easily. This time pulling his hips away and using the left elbow frame to keep separation between them two and pushes Hermansson off from that. Same kind of thing again from Jack Hermansson. But this time he's not leaning away to get Strickland to come in closer. Ultimately, it didn't make much of a difference, but nonetheless, Strickland throws his signature jab, extends a little bit more with this one. He gets off of his back foot and pivots. Hermansson goes to counter it with another double leg, but because he came off of his back foot and he had to pivot with his lead foot as a support, the first leg that he can move now is going to be the front leg. So if he brings his front leg back, he's going to cause his stance to narrow, Look how close now his legs are because he had to do that. The pivoting cost him a bit here, and even though the takedown wasn't a powerful shot or had good distance management, it was well timed enough where now he has to fend off of it and is going to get pushed up against the fence. But he's still able to bring that left arm in between them two, getting the left underhook and the right overhook yet again. And as soon as Hermansson tries to switch up the double into the single, Strickland also switches up his grip, goes with the left overhook this time instead of the underhook, and the right underhook instead of the overhook. He bails on the right underhook and goes for punches instead, causing Hermansson to make him balance on one foot as he's attacking the single leg, and Strickland does the same thing as he did before, pushing down on the head with his left hand and creating a bit of separation with his right hand. You can see because he pushed down on the head, Hermansson had to reinforce his takedown back up against the fence instead of pulling Strickland away from it. And he felt no success here. He felt like he wasn't going to get this, so he bails on the takedown for a spinning back elbow, disengaging from the takedown. Then in the 5th round of their fight, Jack Hermansson goes for an offensive takedown, not really waiting for Strickland to open himself up, so he goes for something a bit different here. He extends the jab and gallops forward. So he brings his back foot forward first and then his front foot, which is usually backwards for striking opportunities, but I can see where he did this to explode out for a double leg, because as soon as he lands with the back foot first, he can explode off of that for a takedown straight at Strickland. And Strickland was still able to get the left underhook in there and knew immediately before Hermansson even did it, he knew Hermansson was going to adjust that and switch into the single. So he actually switches to the appropriate grip, just like the 2 times before Hermansson went for the single. Before he did it this time, he went with the right underhook and left overhook. Then Hermansson went for the single. And then again, you see the same thing, Sean Strickland pushing down on the head just like before. Hermansson bails on the single, doesn't have too many options. Sean Strickland still gets the underhooks on him. So those are most of the middleweight takedowns that he has defended or got taken down by. The rest of them are in the welterweight division. I can go through a lot of them, but it's a lot of the same kind of things. He wasn't as good at defending takedowns back then, especially hand fighting, especially underhooks and stuff. He wasn't as fast with it as he is now. Those fights were a long time ago, even though he still defended the vast majority of the takedowns. The only one I'm really going to look at is from the Kamaru Usman fight, because Kamaru Usman is by far the best wrestler he has ever faced. Even though it was at welterweight and it was a long time ago, and it's not the same Strickland we see today, it is interesting to see what he does against a great MMA wrestler. So as you can see, Usman is in the southpaw stance. Even way back in the day, he was switching from orthodox to southpaw, and he has a very wide stance here in front of Strickland. Strickland steps forward with a jab, and Usman, just like Hermansson, tries to duck under it, but instead of going for the double leg, he attacks the single leg instead, which is right in front of him, right? The main reason he attacked the single leg is because he's in southpaw, so he could just reach forward with his predominant right hand, which is the hand that's forward, and reach for the front leg, and he also did time the step. So he's definitely much better than Jack Hermansson when it comes to timing the opponent's footwork. But Hermansson did have that well-timed shot before when Strickland was pivoting and was forced to fend off the double leg against the fence. And with this single leg, he picks Strickland up, who doesn't go for the underhook. He goes for a headlock. This is something you did not see at all in the middleweight division. He's never went for this before. But then again, he doesn't defend against a lot of southpaw single legs with the head on the outside like this. So by picking Strickland up and trying to slam him, Strickland was able to post on the ground and get back right to his feet. And Usman does what he used to always do back then as a contender. Hold the opponent up against the fence, keep good body control, and just throw strikes at them. So he was constantly throwing knees at Sean Strickland, forcing him to defend this in some kind of way, which Strickland rises and stands up. Strickland tries to get in the position to pull the switch, ultimately lets go of it. He's so far to the side, he's nearly completely facing the fence. When Usman was going to throw the knee, it looked like Strickland wanted to grab and hook under it, and Usman was riding him out for a very long time before he attacked with anything else. And because he really can't get out of the position, Usman seems a bit strong here. Strickland instead put his focus on just fighting off the hands. This is something he would do instantly now. Back then, it took him a bit of time to focus on that. But you can see Usman is trying, man. He's putting a lot of pressure on Strickland, and even at one point, drop to one knee and try to pull Strickland over that knee, tripping him out and potentially trying to get on top, holding onto that strong body lock. But he couldn't budge Strickland too much. And because of that failed attempt, Strickland was able to stand up on both feet and slowly stand up straighter, to the point where Usman tried to do it again, but instead of dropping to his knee, he squats down and tries to pull Strickland over. But Strickland still held good balance. And from another failed attempt there, Strickland pushes away on Usman's left leg, creating separation for him to think and find a way out of this without allowing Usman to continue attacking with different angles for takedowns. So he attempts to bring his left leg in between them two, slowly get his back to the fence, but Usman steps over that leg, causing it to stick in between, and he hooks onto it, tripping out Strickland, but his locked arms are around the hips and not necessarily the body, so it allows Strickland to lean over the lock, right over the arms, and posts on the ground, keeping himself up. And then he focused on fighting the hands again, then pushes away on the leg. Usman tried another method to take down Strickland. He tries to pull his hips and legs forward and pushing down with his upper body, settling them on the ground. But another failed attempt here, where this allows Strickland to hook under Usman's left leg, potentially for his own single, but he ultimately uses it to stand back up. Strickland's showing a lot of resistance here against Usman, man. Strickland does grab onto the cage a couple times, which Keith Peterson didn't mention too often. Usman tries a similar kind of method, but now focuses on one leg at a time. With his right hand, he picks out Strickland's right leg, getting him to his knee, and then attempts to get his back off of that. So this is a completely different method from Usman, where he actually tried to get the hooks in. He got one in because he did force Strickland to balance on his right knee and left foot, while also making him lean forward with all of that top pressure with the body lock. So he hooks that leg in there, and Strickland kicks out that left leg while also rotating his body, getting his back to the fence. And notice how he's fighting off Usman's right hand there. With his left hand, he's gripping onto Usman's right, and he's able to nearly stand completely upright from here, fighting off the hands, his right on Usman's left, his left hand on Usman's right. And because he was able to pull Usman just slightly forward enough, look at this space. This is very important here. You notice how Usman's left forearm is against his left leg? Look what happens when Strickland leans forward into his own right side a little bit. It separates the left forearm and the leg. And notice how he's looking at it. He knows exactly what he's looking for. He sees the separation and immediately shoves in his left elbow, while very importantly, holding on to Usman's left arm with his right hand still. Usman recognizes this. Usman moves his arm inward closer to his body and then pulls his own hips away. So by shoving in that elbow, Strickland rises the elbow up. He's grazing the elbow upward on Usman's chest toward his neck to create even more separation between them two and gets his back to the fence. It looks like Strickland might be able to get out of this. This is some good stuff from Sean Strickland, man, even way back in the day. But in order to get his back to the fence, he gets his left leg a bit out there to the side. So all of his support now is on the fence and his 2 feet. Whereas before, some of his balance was actually off of Usman. Now Usman is not supporting his balance at all. He's got more in front and on the side of Strickland instead of on the fence. So Strickland is balancing himself off the fence and his feet by tearing down that left leg. Usman is going to be able to trip him to the ground. Great adjustment from Kamaru Usman, who finally got him to the ground like this. Now here's something to note about Sean Strickland when he gets taken to the ground. He fights you off very fast. He's constantly throwing up his legs. He's constantly trying to kick you off. He's constantly going for arm bars. His movements on the ground are very, very fast. Even for a welterweight back then. I can only imagine if he gets on his back at middleweight, how fast he'll fight somebody off. I can't show you in real time, but go back and watch the very end of the first round, how fast Strickland gets up to his feet. He pounces up to his feet very quickly when he gets the opening. Here comes Usman with a single leg with no setup. And Strickland gets his hands under, left hand under Usman's chin to rise it up. This is something similar you saw with Jack Hermansson. And he gets that right underhook in there, taking away a bit of the pressure and the drive from Usman, who turns that single leg into a double leg. Then Strickland switches it up for the left overhook as he feels like he did his job by pulling up Usman's head. You can see at this point that Strickland's left eye is damaged. I believe this came off of a jab. That's why you see him constantly squinting. Because Usman didn't feel a way he can get Strickland to the ground at this point, he bails on the takedown, bails on the clinch, and throws a punch off the exit. Usman puts heavy pressure on Strickland, and as soon as the fight is closer to the fence, this time he's unorthodox, he just shoots a double leg. And Strickland very quickly, with his left arm, gets it under Usman's right arm, not allowing him to lock his hands. And of course, it makes the takedown much, much weaker. Not only with one arm, but because he shoved that arm in there, he's able to shove the other arm in there as well. There is no way he's locking his hands if Usman continues right there. Uses that to move his left arm into the other side for the double underhooks. Usman recognizes this, he bails on the takedown yet again, and goes for a punch off the exit, and lands it on Strickland, dropping him. We do have to mention again that Strickland's left eye was a bit damaged, and it seemed like he wasn't seeing out of it too well. That's the same side he got hit by here. And finally, we look at this takedown from Kamaru Usman in the third round of their fight. He throws a 1-2 from distance. Strickland respects the aggression, and he backs up to the fence and tries to exit off his own left. Usman dives in for the double leg. No real drive. His knees are most likely damaged badly even back then. But he was still able to get Strickland to the ground. This was probably the most concerning takedown defense from Sean Strickland. Not because of who he did it to, of course, Usman is the best wrestler he's ever fought, but the type of takedown that got him down. Usman reaches far out there. He didn't have a great drive on Strickland. He nearly crashed himself into the fence and still able to take Strickland to the ground. A big reason as to why was because when he got a hold of Strickland, it was when Strickland's legs were closer together. Look how he's shuffling to his own left, brings his feet together. That's where Usman grabs a hold of him. So it was a well-timed shot, but in real time, it looks a bit concerning of how even slow this takedown came at him. And just like before, on the ground, he does the same kind of stuff. Strickland is constantly kicking off, fighting off with his legs, creating separation. Usman did land some good ground and pound shots. And eventually, Strickland was able to get back up to his feet. So my conclusion after watching Sean Strickland's ability to defend takedowns and get back up to his feet, he's clearly very good at it. He's clearly very good at stopping takedowns. And he's also good at getting back up to his feet while presenting a lot of threats in order to get there. He has great hand fighting. He's very fast with his hands in general. He's very fast off his back. Not the greatest hips against takedowns, but very good with controlling the opponent's hands. His underhooks are his main way of defending these takedowns and also posting on the opponent. And because he does have a high output and most of his punches are his jab, that's where most of the takedowns are going to come off of. So a lot of the takedowns, if they're countering his attacks, they're going to be countering his jab more often. And that's much easier for Strickland to defend off of than if he threw a right straight or an overhand or a very committed power punch, which would be much more difficult to defend against. So yeah, Strickland does have good takedown defense. He absolutely does. Is it enough to stop Dricus overall? We'll see. Dricus is very strong. He's very big. He's not the best kind of wrestler, but he's multifaceted, right? He has good trips. He's got some good double legs, especially level changes against Darren Till. Those are really nice. He's heavy on top, he's powerful on top, and dangerous. So I think Dricus is overall the most dangerous wrestler / grappler that Strickland has ever fought before. Is he the best wrestler? No, that would go to Usman most likely. But the fact that Dricus is in the middleweight division, he's much bigger than Usman, it could make him a more problematic kind of wrestler than a more skilled wrestler due to the size. But then again, Strickland's much bigger now than he was when he fought Usman, so he's going to have a lot more strength. He walks around very heavy, like 215. It's going to be quite interesting to see how much of Sean Strickland's takedown defense is going to be tested in this fight. So I hope you guys enjoyed the breakdown, and if you did, make sure to give this a thumbs up. If you enjoyed my content, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.